Hey everybody, it's Andrew from Collective Intelligence, and in the last video we got about 15 or 16 minutes into using Serum, and it wasn't enough time. We need more. So here is X amount more minutes inside of Serum, and we're going to go beyond the envelope. Maybe that's what we can call the video, beyond the envelope. We're going to go beyond the envelope. We're going to talk about the LFOs. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you map everything. So let's jump into it and do it. Here we are again with Serum in front of us. We have talked about all of these parameters, the envelopes. Now we're going to talk about the LFOs, velocity, note, and everything else here. Cool. So LFO. So LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. And that means that it's a very low cycling wave. In this case, that's what, like a triangle wave. But we can change the shape of what the waveform is. But that LFO, just think of it as though it's a sine wave or something like this, moving through its cycle, but it doesn't make a sound. It's just making that movement, right? And we can capture that movement up and down, and we can assign that movement to a parameter. So in this case, what we'll do is we've just got a saw wave here. So if I play, let me just pop my headphones on. If we play a sound on the keyboard, we've just got a plain, simple saw wave playing. I'll turn the filter on, and I'll change the filter to a bandpass filter, right? And just for fun, just give it a little bit of resonance. And then I'm going to assign the LFO to control the cutoff, right? And you saw in the last video, I did it quite quickly, and I maybe didn't explain it that well. I'm going to grab the LFO from the little crosshair here, right? So I click with my left mouse button, I hold, and I drag. And now you can see that my cursor's got a little plus on it. So I can now drop the LFO onto a parameter, and it's going to exert control over that parameter. So in this case, I'm going to drop it on the cutoff, okay? And you'll instantly notice that now the surrounding of the cutoff knob has this blue surrounding. Sorry, poor choice of words there. And if I hold down a key now, you'll notice that now this sound is going, or the cutoff rather, is going on the journey of starting from closed. Doesn't actually start from closed. If I put it on trigger, every time I start it, it starts from the bottom, opens up, and then closes again, right? So the LFO is sending the cutoff those instructions. So if I change the shape of this, if I brought it, right? So this changes the behavior exerted on the cutoff. You'll notice that the cutoff is, the knob itself is set in the default position, but the blue line travels all around. We can actually change where the blue line is acting. So first of all, this little blue representation of the blue line around outside the knob, if you put your cursor over that and you click, hold, and then drag down, you narrow down the amount of movement the LFO is going to put on the cutoff, right? So now it's a finer amount of movement. If I click and hold that and pull it back up, it's more movement again, right? So I can control the amount that this parameter is being modulated. And then if I come over to the matrix here, you'll see that this type category here, if you click on that arrow, there's two possibilities. So arrow one way and the other. And I think there's like dipole, I think is the word, or tripole or something like this, or unipolar. There we go. So bipolar is either both plus and minus the value. So if the knob's set in the center, it'll move both negative and positive from that center value. Or unipolar, which is it'll move either negative or positive from where the knob is set, but not one side to another. So I'll show you that in practice. So we're looking right now at bipolar. We'll change it to unipolar, right? So now it's only moving upwards and back from that point. And I can pull that down and narrow it, or I can even make it go negative. But it will not go from one side of the cutoff knob to the other, right? And I can move the cutoff knob around. Right. So that is how you would map the LFO. Now we want to know how to actually control it. So down here, we're looking at a little grid interface, right? And we can change the amount of grid steps that we've got to 16 or all the way down to 0, right? And this just helps us, if we've got this all sunk in time, we can change the actual waveform, right? So if I hold shift on my keyboard and then I click, I can make like a stepped sequence, right? And then if I hold down the key again, right, it's following that stepped sequence. So if I go 16, then that gives me finer control over the sequence, right? So I can do this. Right? So, I mean, I'm not playing with that for now, but that's how you could set a grid. And if you hold shift, then it's going to snap it to the grid. If you don't hold shift and you just click here, you need to actually click on a node to pull the nodes around. So the white nodes are actual like points that it's snapping to. And then these sort of hollow nodes, they will let you bend it around. And you can double click to create another solid node whenever you like, right? And then you can double click on an existing one to get rid of it. You can't double click on the first and the last. They're always there. So if you want it just to not do anything, just pull it to the top, hold shift and just pull all the way across. And then if you really like OCD, you can double click all these ones in between and you can get rid of them all. And then you can have a friggin' blank slate. Just like that. Cool. And if I pull that down, you'll notice then there's another guy that appears here. And then if I get rid of him, cool. So now we've only got those two nodes, right? And then we draw another one and we do whatever we want. Cool. So that's how you control the interface in there. You can actually open up predefined waveforms. Let's call it a waveform because traditionally it's kind of like either a saw wave or a sine wave or something like this. So if we go saw down, okay. If we go sine wave, right, sweet. And then we can listen to the different character, right? Sounds different to the sort of triangle. And then you've got a bit crazy, or you've got dome, or you got gunshot, or gunshot 2. You get the point, right? So you've got different shapes in here. I'm getting distracted. So then you've got trigger, envelope, and off, right? So if I press a note on the keyboard, it triggers the envelope to play, and then it keeps playing, right? So it just is re-triggering, and it's re-triggering at the speed of the LFO. In this case, 1/4, so quarter note at 120 BPM, right? If I speed that up, the LFO gets faster. It's basically Ableton is the master, this is the slave. So if I make speed changes out here, they get reflected inside of the synth. And then we got envelope. So if I press it, it does a one shot, right? So it just follows that envelope once over that 1/4 note period of time, and then it stops. And then off is just freestyling, man. Just whenever you press, it's cycling through. So I usually use trigger or envelope, generally speaking, but depends on the sound. Next, we've got BPM. So we can sync it to the BPM of the track. If we don't, we can do crazy stuff. Now I'm just playing with it. So LFO rise, so rate determines the speed of the cycling time, right? So if you've got it sunk to the BPM, All good. Then rise is going to let you set a rise up time for the LFO or a ramp up. Cool. And that's if retrigger is enabled. And then next you got delay. Enables a delay on the LFO start. So you can set a period of time before the LFO actually sets in. And then smooth makes the LFO more smooth. So it's more gradual. Right? So then you've got anchor, which can put things out of sync. But if you need to use that, you can play around with it. I've never actually used it. Triplet, if you want triplet timing. If you're a bad boy. And then dotted timing, if you want dotted timing. Cool. And they're the different controls for the LFO. So, yep, you've got a bunch of different LFOs in here that you can utilize. I believe even more are possible through different ways. So LFO through to 8, yep, and you've got 1, 2, 3 envelopes. But you can use LFOs as envelopes as well because you can always turn the envelope setting on. So you've got lots and lots of envelopes available to you inside of Serum. Next, we've got the velocity. So velocity can be mapped to stuff like level. If I press really lightly or I press really hard, it will play the volume accordingly. I can also map that to certain parameters like the cutoff. So the harder I play, the brighter the sound. Same goes for note tracking, right? So I can pop note tracking on there. And if I play down low, whoa. I'm going to remove that modulator, right? So I'm going to remove, I can remove modulator LFO. I don't want it to do that anymore. It's just disturbing. Right, so I press that note. I press a higher note. And because of the note tracking, the filter opens up further. So now I've got two levels of sensitivity here. How hard I press, but then also how high I press the note. So if I press it really hard and then I press it really high, the filter will open really far. If I press it gentle and high, it won't quite open as far, but it'll open, and so on and so forth. Cool. Down here, I've got the voicing. So the voicing mono is going to let me sum the sound to mono, so it's not stereo anymore, right? So that's only going to give us one voice. Poly is going to give us the ability to have lots of different voices if we so choose to use them. So we can go 16. So we're using 32 voices there. And if I hold down multiple keys, we got lots of CPU power going on, and we got lots of voices active. So then you got legato, which is going to let you determine whether, if you got envelope mode on, whether the envelope will always re-trigger from the start or not if a second note is played. Right. And then we've got pitch bend, and then the plus and minus value and semitones of the bend range. And then we got the mod wheel, which is not doing anything. And then we got the ability to actually press keys. And then we got portamento. Which lets us slide between notes. And then the timing at which. And then the curve of which as well. If we're delicate. Whoa. It's really choppy for some reason. So this is the way that it's going to slide up. The curve of the slide. Something like that. Cool. So that's everything here except for the mods. Cool. So we can go ahead and just map general parameters. So I can go to I can right click on that. I can go modulation source and I can send it to be controlled by the macro. So that's opening up the cutoff, right? So I can do that, and I can also control the resonance at the same time, right? And I could even control, what else? I don't know. The drive. Cool. So I can control multiple parameters with mod knobs. So that's fun. Okay, so that is everything, I believe. Let's jump over to the effects. So we've got a bunch of different effects inside of Ableton. Let's just open them all. So we got hyper, we got distortion, we got a flanger, we got a phaser, and a lot of these are self-explanatory. I'm not going to go into them. Chorus, delay, compressor with multi-band sort of OTT style compression, reverb, EQ, and then another final filter before we go to the master. So we got all of these effects as well. And then we've got the modulation matrix. So we've got all of the parameters here that are being controlled, right? So we can see the source. So the macro one is controlling the filter cutoff. And this is the amount it's controlling it by. And then this is the type, whether it's bipolar or unipolar. And so on and so forth. That's what we're seeing for all of them. Then we can apply sort of curves. So as we're increasing this, maybe we want it to, instead of just increase on a linear sort of scale, we want it to be like exponential curve or something like this, right? So it can change the way in which it feels when we're turning the knob. And then we've got global. And global has a whole bunch of global parameters. So we got chaos filters, chaos LFOs rather. So these are quite cool. You can use these for a lot of creative things. So basically it's just an LFO that plays in the background. You can sync it up to BPM. You can do sample and hold on it. You can set it to mono. You can do a bunch of stuff. You can change your unison, your width, your warp, blah, 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 blah. You can change your oscillator settings, so quality settings, what your tuning is. We've got build, blah, 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 noise amount. And then we've got just preferences through here. Cool. So that is Serum completely, pretty much. There's more to Serum, of course, but that's a pretty general and good overlook. So now let's make a sound. Let's make a sound using all of those skills that we learned. I guess they're skills now. So we'll do something with the acid waveform, right? I'm going to use envelope 3, and I'm going to pull the sustain all the way down, and I'm going to apply the envelope to the wavetable position. Right, and I can tighten this up. I think it's a good length. Right, and then we can make an envelope if we wanted for the overall amplitude. So this controls the overall amp envelope. So changes that we make here. Great, cool. And then we'll go and we'll set up a filter as well. And we'll use envelope 2 to control the filter. Right, put a bit of resonance. Right, we'll give a bit of drive just to make up for some lost volume. Cool, we can put a bit of envelope on the resonance as well. So when it starts, it's higher and then it drops down. We could even do the same for the drive if we wanted to. Absolute mad lads. All right, so I want to map as many parameters as possible. Let's go ahead and go distortion. We'll go and we'll use diode distortion. And then we'll use this LFO as an envelope as well, right? Because we've used all 3 envelopes there. So we'll go, this can be a 1/8 envelope, and then I'm going to apply it to the drum. Right, so it's really giving it a bit of... Go all the way. Cool. And then we're going to go ahead and put some... We could map this macro and call this the dimension knob. So when we want to... Right, we can do that every now and then if we really want to. Let's get some delay going. Let's go 1/8. Go full power dotted. Let's go ping pong delay. I want to put an overall filter over top of this whole thing again. Good. The delay before the filter? I mean the filter before the delay? Let's map that. I don't want it to move in both directions, so I'll come over here and just tick that. Filter 2. Right. And then what else do we want? Let's go compressor and let's give it a bit of the old multiband. That really gives it a bit of snot. Right, that's pretty weird. What else are we going to do? We could say we'll cut out any bottom frequencies. We could add a bit of top if we wanted. And then if we really want, we could put this crappy reverb on. Just always think this reverb sounds bad. Let's put the portamento on. And we just made some kind of weird sound. Sweet. So, I hope you enjoyed my videos on Serum. If you'd like to see some more, feel free to comment below and tell me to do more. And until then,